Justin. That's all good. We can hear each other. Hear me groan with another year in the calendar. That's right. Another year.
Oh my. Oh me, oh my.
Age a day, you age a year. What's up? What's up, everybody? We're here. We are here to start the show. We are live, so I guess we can get this party started.
Woo-woo.
Starting in 3, 2. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 681, recorded on Wednesday, August 1st, 2018. Kiki loves you. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and today we will be filling your heads with great tits, anxiety, and shrooms. But first,
disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. When the world hands you lemons, make lemonade. Or you could polish aluminum with them, or lighten aging spots if you've got them, or sanitize a cut or counteract an itch, or deodorize your cat litter with shredded peels, or squeeze the juice out on your dirty old sneakers to give them new life, or gargle the lemon juice to enjoy fresh lemony breath, or use the peels to ward off ants where they've been sneaking into the house, or make a battery out of them that illuminates an LED light bulb to amaze your friends, or learn to juggle them and make your friends jealous of your newfound skill, or fashion them into earmuffs just because you've got so many lemons. Why not? Or remove all the seeds and plant them in the ground so that one day you will have many lemons producing thousands, lemon trees producing thousands of lemons that you can hand out to strangers while telling them all the wonderful things that you can do with lemons. Or when life hands you lemons, you can forget all about lemons and tune into This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Yes, science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. Not just any episode. And I don't know if anybody is a Drake fan out there. My title for tonight is a shout out to a song of his, I've Got Feelings, and I've been getting all sorts of tweets online. Kiki, do you love me? Kiki, do you love me? By complete strangers. I had no idea what was going on, and now I find, because of this song, people want to know. Kiki, do you love me? And the answer is yes.
I didn't even know you knew Drake.
The answer is yes. Kiki loves you. Kiki loves all of you. And you know what? I'm here with you to talk about science, one of my favorite things in the whole world, on my birthday. What a gift. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being my present on my birthday. Let's have a party. Let's have a science party. Let's have a science party. Yeah, what did I bring for the show tonight? You know what? I brought a whole bunch of stories. And because it was my birthday, I didn't do a lot of planning. So we'll just see what I get through.
We're gonna wing it on the birthday.
It's Kiki's
Birthday winging
potpourri.
Scientific potpourri.
Yeah.
Justin, what'd you bring?
I brought some stories. I brought bacteria and fungi everywhere. I've got it everywhere. I've bioengineered lungs, and I've got drugs.
Drugs. I've got, drugs. Okay, let's talk about those. Blair, I hear you have great tits.
I do, and I'm going to be talking about their brains today. You know, brains. I also have some mouse placentas and spider eyes.
Spider eyes. I'm just imagining that as the title or a main lyric to some kind of 80s hit song. I don't know.
Spider eyes are watching you.
That's right. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. All right, everyone, we're going to jump into this episode of This Week in Science. And before we do, I just want to remind you that if you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, you can do it very easily. You can find information at twis.org about how to subscribe on Google, iTunes, and YouTube. If you want to find us other places where podcasts are found, search for This Week in Science. And now into the scientific birthday potpourri of stories that I call the news. All right. I've got a little bit of anxiety here, a little bit of anxiety about my birthday. And every once in a while, I deal with anxiety. Well, you know what? I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who gets anxious. In fact, monkeys get anxious too. Monkeys have anxiety and they can pass it to their children down generations. Familial anxiety runs in monkey families, according to a new study reported in the July 30th issue of the Journal of Neuroscience. According to study co-author Ned Kalin from the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health in Madison, we can trace how anxiety falls through the family tree, which parents pass it on to which children, how cousins are affected, and so on. And this brain activity pattern, I mean, this is the Journal of Neuroscience, so it's not just the behavioral trait. They're looking at the brain. They have been able to categorize a brain activity pattern in rhesus monkeys that shows up in young monkeys who display anxious temperaments. And because they're able to identify it in some individuals, they're able to track it through the family tree as indicative of anxious behavior. Anxious individuals have this brain activity pattern as well. And so what the interesting aspect of this is, we think of apes, monkeys as our close relatives, right? But what the researchers are hoping is that this work that they're doing on other primate species will be able to give us more information on how to help people with anxiety, because obviously this is something that has been with primates for quite some time. Anxiety is not just in the human condition.
I'm actually amazed that that means that there are monkeys that aren't anxious, because I don't think I've ever seen a monkey that didn't look very anxious about everything.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a monkey who's like in a neuroscience lab. That I would no matter what, it would nervous. Like, I'm amazed that they even could find monkeys that weren't anxious.
Yeah, so they what they did to test for this anxious temperament is they subjected young monkeys to a stressful situation and saw how they reacted to it. Were they cool and calm, or was there a bit of anxiety that showed? Did sweat start collecting on their brow? Well, no, that's not what happened. But they had an intruder, which was a human, enter the young monkey's cage to show only its profile to the monkey, not face it head on and make eye contact of any kind. And so the researchers say that the monkey in this situation doesn't really know what's going to happen because it can't see the individual's eyes. And so monkeys freeze and fall silent in this threatening situation. And by measuring how silent and frozen the monkey becomes, and also by measuring levels of cortisol, a stress hormone, the researchers were able to figure out which monkeys were the most stressed out by this interaction. They then took these stressed out monkeys and looked at their amygdalas, and they were able to find that the amygdala, which is known to be involved in fear and the fear response in ourselves and also other monkeys and other animals, They found that two parts of it, the central nucleus of the amygdala and the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, acted together so that if the activity of one was high, then the activity of the other was also high as well. And it's this activity of the brain that seems to be passed on from parents to offspring.
That's very interesting. So it's very easy for people nowadays to say, oh, I have anxiety. Oh, I'm anxious, right? But that's actually a clinical term that means something. And I think it's really important to kind of study this and know where it comes from and know how to look for it, because it can be debilitating. It's not stress.
Absolutely.
It's not just nervousness. It can really be a problem. And I think that the more we know about it, the better, since we are putting ourselves in situations more and more now that I feel like create and breed anxiety in those that are prone to it.
Yeah. So we could potentially breed less stressed out monkeys, but we just should probably try and figure out how to help ourselves reduce our anxious levels and deal with those brain activity patterns that are hereditary in nature. And know that stress, it's the part of the animal condition.
Well, and you might start getting that question now on your medical forms. Do you have anxiety in your family?
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting question. So moving on forward, just a quick note, the Large Hadron Collider is moving on from just smashing protons, neutrons at each other. It is moving on to full-blown atoms. We're going to start they're starting to beam rays of lead atoms, heavy atoms, which is really cool at the Large Hadron Collider, in the hopes that we will be able to smash them and find out what happens when you smash heavy atoms together. And also, if we can actually produce gamma rays and be able to study what happens with some of the universe's most energetic particles by making them ourselves. That's a quick tidbit. Very exciting news moving forward on the Large Hadron Collider. More discoveries to be made there for sure. And so now that brings me to this question of, we've got science figuring all these things out. And according to a new NASA-sponsored study that was published this last Monday in the journal Nature Astronomy, basically saying, hey, all you people who want to terraform Mars, well, it really doesn't look like there's enough carbon dioxide. And there's also, it's going to be a really tough time increasing the density of the atmosphere and the concentration of the gases in such a way that we'll ever be able to walk on Mars's surface without a pressurized suit. Well, Elon Musk came back and was like, no, we can do it. There's carbon trapped all over the place in the permafrost and the carbon, Anyway, I just want to know, everyone, who are you going to trust? Science or Elon Musk?
Oh, obviously Elon Musk.
Yeah,
put it out there.
He put a car in space.
Yeah, that's how we're gonna get there. We're gonna drive Tesla.
Yeah.
To Mars.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
What you do is you take the excess CO2 from our atmosphere, you see, and you just send it straight. You make a very long series of tubes, and you send it
like the internet.
Yeah, it's a series of tubes. So then we can just keep burning the fossil fuels over here. We'll just send our carbon dioxide over to Mars. 2 problems solved.
There you go. Very good. That's good. I like it. Let's take our carbon dioxide. Let's port it over to Mars. Mars needs our carbon dioxide. Let's do that.
Yeah. More carbon dioxide, more denser atmosphere. There you go.
That's right. So the interesting aspect here is part of this relies of this particular study is they're looking at the difficulty in increasing the atmospheric pressure on the planet, which is an important issue. And one of the caveats they say is we don't currently have the technology to make this happen. So, I mean, maybe where Elon Musk and the science actually come into lockstep is the visionary attitude of Elon and others like him who may create the next technologies that will allow this terraforming process to take place. But
yeah, that's
as
what I
of
was gonna say.
now,
It's very on brand for him to say that,
oh,
right?
yeah, I gotta protect my brand of the vision. We are going to Mars.
Do the undoable. Believe in the impossible.
So the thing
etc.
is, right? So you can terraform Mars, but you still need some sort of spacesuit to walk about outside, right?
Yeah.
Who wants to go outside anymore anyway? I mean, just wait 100 years for Earth, and you'll be like, yeah, nobody's going outside anymore. It's too hot. The other thing is, this is assuming that we just improve the technology of terraforming planets. What if we start to improve the technology of bioengineering humans so that they can exist on Mars better? Right? Like, you know, why have it if you don't want the spacesuit, but you want land, lots of land, and you know, sky above, much little as it is currently. You know, maybe it's worth terraforming your body to go live on Mars or the next
Absolutely.
generation.
Yeah. Well, I would think that it ethically, potentially, a parent deciding to genetically modify their children, their offspring, for their offspring to go to Mars, not necessarily okay because of consent issues, but an individual figuring out
They're
how
children.
to
Wait a sec. What consent? They're children.
who are going to grow up and say, maybe I didn't want to go to Mars, Dad.
Yeah, but that's like saying I didn't want to grow up in the Arctic, right? Like that's where you're born, and that's where your parents decide to settle down. That's where you do. I didn't want to grow up in a big city. I wanted to live on a farm. That's too bad. That's not what your parents decided for you. Like this is not the choice you get to make before getting here. This is something that's already underway.
So what I'm hearing is it's a good thing you're done having babies, Justin, because
well, he's
some
never
questionable tactics.
Yeah.
Who's done doing what?
Uh-oh. Hot off the presses.
Wait a sec. No. If I was to go to Mars, I'd have to have new babies because I can't bring the old ones with me.
Fair,
I'd have to have a next generation of Mars babies.
Yeah.
And I'd build them in a bioreactor.
That's right. There we go. And ship them in their bioreactors to Mars, where they would be born as the first citizens of the red planet. All right. Speaking of crazy ideas, these kinds of, science fiction, kind of in taking science to its extremities. It's fun to think about. Some of these things may or may not be possible in the future. But the other flip side of this is the science of myth and the past. And there are all sorts of ideas about the Great Pyramids. The Great Pyramids have tall tales about them, and there have been stories told for years about aliens.
Yeah, the alien satellites.
Right? How were they built? Well, we actually do know how they were built now, but many questions about them. And then, a year or so back, I think they did some new some new radio imaging of the pyramids and found a new cavern, like a new chamber inside the Great Pyramid at Giza that had never been discovered before, which is an exciting finding. Well, along these lines, a research group publishing in the Journal of Applied Physics this last week has applied theoretical physics to look at how the Great Pyramids would respond electromagnetically to radio waves. Now, the idea is very similar to if you live in a wood frame house, maybe, and you have a big subwoofer speaker on the floor or somewhere, and you turn it up really loud, and it's a song that has a good amount of bass in it. You can actually get your house resonating and shaking when certain radio frequencies, sound waves, are played through the speaker. There's the rumble from the sound, and it resonates with the shape of the house and can actually make your house hum. I've done this before accidentally.
I was going to say, this sounds like it's spoken by somebody who has done this.
I have done this. And so they didn't actually go rumble and shake the Great Pyramids, but they did theoretically, using what is known of the structure of the pyramids themselves, use in a theoretical model the different frequencies of radio waves as they would what would happen to the inside of the pyramids as they're played, and or as the pyramid would be exposed to them. And what they found is that the pyramids are actually tuned to respond and to focus very certain sections of the electromagnetic spectrum, which is, based on structure and the internal dynamics and the material. This is not an odd thing, but it's just interesting to pinpoint exactly how the Great Pyramids act as radio wave intensifiers and focusers, how the Great Pyramids resonate with the electromagnetic spectrum. It's a very interesting finding. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And I think, and the researchers go on to say that their findings of how the pyramid respond to electromagnetic waves can be used in their further studies trying to structure nanoparticles that can be used to respond to certain portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's a very interesting leap, and I am fascinated by it, using something that's on the macro scale to eventually create things at the nano scale.
I feel like they could have like electro radio resonated a porta potty and made the same connection of what they could do in the future. Yeah, okay.
This sounds like somebody really did think that it was an alien satellite dish and they wanted to see if it would
turn
resonate
on
and transmit waves as anticipated. They're like, yeah, see, look, it shook just like we thought. Yeah, that's it.
Or no, maybe it was somebody phoning home.
Oh,
and they just had the cover of it was a research thing we did.
It was
research.
It's
just a study.
So part of it is the design of specifically shaped nanoparticles with a pyramidal structure. And so if you have objects that are known and their various parameters are known, you can test them in a model system. And so they go on to say Polina Kapitanova, who's a member of the Faculty of Physics and Technology at ITMO University, choosing a material with suitable electromagnetic properties, we can obtain pyramidal nanoparticles with a promise for practical application in nanosensors and effective solar cells.
It's all a cover. Captain Nova, we're on to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. It's I think the pyramids, yes, maybe it's a stretch, but there is some logic there. And then, being the Great Pyramid, this is going to probably be used in some kind of sensational History Channel shockumentary or something at some point in time.
It's going to be pointed to as evidence
of something, but really, it's just physicists being funny. And I mean, if you're a scientist, you're like, look, we want to make pyramid structured things. There's big pyramids. People like those. Maybe they'll read our paper.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Which we did. So
I believe with a name like Captain Nova, I'm starting to think she's really from another planet, and it's just she's
a Romulan.
Not even really good cover. Like, I am Captain Nova. Yeah, my name. Yeah, okay, I believe you.
All right, that does it for me for now. I've got more stories later. What you got, Justin?
Further later in the show, I've got an international research team led by a European Molecular Biology Laboratory and University of Tartu from Estonia. They conducted a global study of bacteria and fungi in soil. What they discovered is that a microbial battlefield is going on just beneath the planet's surface. So they found bacteria and fungi in constant competition, producing arsenals of antibiotics and antibiotic resistances in order to gain advantage over one another. So the study analyzed 1,450 sites around the planet. They took 40 samples per site, which, if basic math is to be believed, this resulted in somewhere in the neighborhood of 58,000 soil samples. They had a condition they selected these samples from. It had to be in an area unaffected by human activity, human agriculture. They compiled the data from all their analyses and ended up with a 14.2 terabyte data set, which as soon as they saw that, how much, what a mind-boggling amount of data they had collected, the researchers ran from the lab and have not been seen since. No, of course not. They instead, though, they decided out of the 1,450 sites, they narrowed it down to 189 to do more in-depth analysis. So, and these 189 covered all the continents, and they had biomes from tropical forests to tundra. Of the millions of genes sequenced in the study, only 0.5%, that's a 0.5%, overlapped with existing data from gut and ocean microbiomes. The amount of unknown genes, they say, says Peter Bork to be specific, the amount of unknown genes is overwhelming, but the ones we can interpret clearly point to a global war between bacteria and fungi in soil. Peter Bork is of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory and is one of the authors on the paper. Overall, the bacterial diversity in soil is lower if there are more fungi present. And the bacterial diversity is therefore higher if there are less fungi present. The team also found a strong link between the number of antibiotic-resistant genes in bacteria and the amount of fungi, especially those with potential for antibiotics. So things like penicillin and the like. There's Falk Hildebrand, also of the European Molecular Biology Study, one of the lead authors. This pattern could well be explained by the fact that the fungi produce antibiotics in warfare with bacteria, and only bacteria with adequate antibiotic resistance genes can survive this. So there's this back and forth constantly going on in the soil. Some of the sort of interesting things here too is that the fungi are they sort of have different climate zones. Okay, so they found regional difference in the distribution of the bacteria and the fungi. Bacteria are everywhere, with the highest genetic diversity in temperate zones with moderate climates. Environmental factors such as temperature are the most decisive in their relative abundance. They often prefer hot and wet locations. Fungi are usually more prevalent in colder and drier climates, which is weird. I wouldn't have thought the tundra would be more fungi. I would have thought they would like the wetter things, right? They also tend to be more geographically restricted, so there's more differences in the populations of fungi between different continents and in different regions. This, they say, implies that the relative contributions of bacteria and fungi to nutrient cycling are also going to be different everywhere in the world, and that global climate change is going to affect soils differently in different places. So that study that is from the local soil and making predictions has to be adjusted for a completely different biome everywhere else.
Yeah, and with climate change, as the permafrost and topsoils thaw out or get hotter, there are going to be some fungal and bacterial spores that will thaw out as well. New species that might come back to life. Oh, I mean, old species that might come back to life, and
be
so
new species.
and be new species. Yeah. So there could be some really interesting complications as a result of this.
Also, they kind of noticed that they did do comparisons with farmland and lawns from other data that had already been collected, and found it was completely different. Like that which is touched by man, soil touched by man, does not look at all like natural soil. So
Yeah.
there's like they're like, but that could have an effect on things, but we don't know what that is. It's also it's in the category of
screwed it up.
in the category of unknown consequences. Better understanding of interactions of fungi and bacteria in soil could provide information for uses of fertilizer in agriculture, beneficial microorganisms that could be or should be in our environment that aren't. So there's all sorts of potential uses. This was published in Nature today.
Yeah, I mean, ecosystems are really complicated and they make up, it's everything, right? So even to say, you know, you want to save the rainforest means you also maybe have to save the fungi and the bacteria that are interacting in the soil to make rainforest soil. So maybe just as we need to save species, we need to save soil samples.
Well, yeah, totally. So like we've talked about this with the invasive species. It's not really the invasive species of plants. It's not so much that the plant itself outcompetes. It's that the soil bacteria that they bring with that they nurture and that nurtures them outcompetes other soil bacteria. So when you're talking about preserving or bringing back, right? Like we have this massive forest fire, and so then we waited a really long time before. You got to make sure you got the soil microbes that were there that supported the forest in the first place. Otherwise, it probably won't work.
Something that I think is another interesting consideration here is the fungal species and disease. I spoke with some researchers a few years back, and they all seemed really concerned about the emerging diseases that are the result of fungi. And it's even more so than bacteria and the concern about antibacterial resistance. I mean, these researchers were like, things are changing. These fungal species are spreading, and we don't know how to combat them. And so this study is really fascinating in that it starts to get at that inherent ecological relationship that's been ongoing between bacteria and the fungi, and how potentially we can learn more about that and how will that help us moving forward in our health ventures. Because it is emerging diseases that are related to funguses. It's a growing issue that's going to be a huge concern at some point if things change too much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other thing in the light of global warming is as we have to start shifting agriculture practices different places, as we have to start looking at when a forest burns down and you replant it, do you replant it in the same place where the climate's going to be a lot different in 10, 20 years? Or do you place it somewhere else? And when you place it somewhere else, you've got to bring the soil with you. You've got to, it's not just what we see above the surface that makes the habitat or the biome. It's all dependent on what's going on down under.
It's dependent on what's happening in the atmosphere. It's all the way down through the biosphere that we see, even to that unseen underground aspect of the biosphere. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very complex system. And when we think that we understand it, we're fooling ourselves. But we're learning more, which is awesome. This is a fascinating study, Justin. Thanks for this one. It's really interesting. I love things that start elucidating pictures like this. New questions, many new questions. And I have a question. Is it time for Blair's Animal Corner?
With Blair? Oh.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
I want to tell you all about great tits.
Oh yeah, I like those.
Yeah,
we mentioned those earlier. What's up? What's up?
great tits, aka the common European songbirds, have been found to be even more interesting than previously described in previous studies. Great tits are very unusual because, as opposed to other tits, they are resourceful in very specific ways. So they actually wanted to see in a previous study, this is from Lund University in Sweden. They were looking at the way that they get food and they store food. And they wanted to see how they observe at a distance and memorize where things are stored. They found in this past study that great tits did something unusual compared to their other close relatives, the marsh tit and the willow tit. Unlike the marsh and willow versions, these great tits did not store food that they found to survive the winter. They stood back, they observed where the willow tits and the marsh tits were hiding food, and then they stole it.
Ooh, they were lurkers.
They were lurkers.
They were birds.
As the researchers say, they were very resourceful. So
here we go.
We've known that their behavior is a little more complicated than other European songbirds already. This new study wanted to look at self-control. What we consider impulse control is usually only associated with, same old story from other stories we've talked about with anything related to cognition or smarts, larger, cognitively advanced animals with larger brains. Guess what? According to new results, birds are pretty smart, and these great tits have a huge capacity for self-control. In fact, it rivals that of chimpanzees, and what I find particularly interesting, ravens.
Wow.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So the way they tested this, they placed food in a small translucent cylinder, and if they had bad self-control, if they couldn't control their impulses, the impulsive act was to peck at the food in the translucent cylinder. But if they refrained from pecking at the food at all and moved to the end of the cylinder, far away where the opening was, to access the food, then that demonstrated what they considered impulse control, because they didn't go for the visual cue right away. They reserved themselves, went to the edge, and got their food.
Yeah, but isn't that, I don't know, a little unfair test, because the raven isn't a lurker, right? Like the raven is not like, I'm going to wait until that. So there is already a watch, observe, and be patient strategy that the great tits are using.
Right. But ravens often are known to kind of look at the scene, assess it, sometimes fashion a tool for it, right?
Right.
So they also similarly don't go for the easiest option right away if it's obviously not the right one.
Right.
So what they found was that this impulse control was demonstrated 80% of the time in their tests. Huge, 80%. That's better than most of the animals they tested and is almost on par with the ravens and chimps. So they did a similar test with ravens and chimps, and they had a similar response rate. And of course, they always go back to size, always with the size of the brain. The brain volume of a great tit corresponds to 3% of a raven's brain, so small, and 0.1% of a chimp.
0.1.
So based on the size, you would anticipate they don't have this complex, blah, 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 the same old story. But what you can see is that it would make a good strategy to have good impulse control. If you're hanging back, you're watching your contemporary tits hiding food, and you can't run up to the food when you see it. You have to wait. You have to wait for those other animals to leave the area, and then you can go get the food. So it's a similar strategy. It makes sense that they have it.
It reminds me a lot of brood parasitism, but in this case, instead of parasitizing a nest like cowbirds do, the great tit is parasitizing the food stores of birds that do store their food. So it sits around and watches and waits and says, okay, you guys are going to do all the work storing the food. I'm going to hang out and I'm going to use your work to get my survival. And then in the case of the brood parasites, the females, and this is interesting in this study as well, they see a difference between females and males, with females being better. So it's the same thing in the brood parasites. The birds, usually the females are in the cowbirds, are the ones that are looking for a place to lay their egg in somebody else's nest. And so they're watching and waiting for that opportunity. They're not going to build their own nest. They're going to use somebody else's.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the story of the ant and the grasshopper, right? Isn't that what it is? Except that in the end, grasshopper just steals all the ant's food.
That's right. I'll take your food. Thanks a lot.
You know, it's the titty tit world out there, you know?
Why not?
Huh?
Well, I think
What did you say?
He said it was a titty tit world.
Well, they're food anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's really interesting because we were looking also among food storing birds, corvids, jays, for that matter. They watch their conspecifics. They pay attention to where other birds are when they're hiding their food. So I don't know about the marsh and the willow tits, whether they're as observant about whether another bird is hanging out and watching, but at least I know, at least in jays and scrub jays and in magpies, they are very observant and they don't want to hide food when somebody's watching.
Yeah.
And they will also take their competitors' food. So if they see another bird hiding food and they don't have anything to hide, they'll go take it and use it for their own.
But wasn't it like something that maybe I've got this story wrong that we did 100 years ago? Something about the Blue Jays not always like necessarily remembering, but they hide so much stuff. They like sometimes they're like finding other Blue Jays stash. It's just like, let's all agree to hide stuff, and then it'll be like Easter egg hunt. We'll just go looking in like.
I don't think that was so much scrub jays. I think scrub jays are much more specific as to what they're hiding and where. But maybe
it was squirrels. It was something.
It might have been squirrels. It might have been squirrels, but I think we've seen something similar to this either in the marsh or the willow tit, or it might have been the Siberian tit as well. The Siberian tit does hide a whole lot of food, and there was a question about are you just using a particular pattern matching strategy? What's going on? Yeah.
But I also think this is a reminder to the overall idea that, you know, maybe we're just not testing animals right for these things, and that maybe impulse control is actually a really important part of being a wild animal. If you think about it, there's so much out there that could kill you. And there's so many ways you could die from starvation or not finding water or not finding shelter, that impulse control is usually pretty important. And
absolutely,
I would argue that if the closer we look, more and more animals contain that, but in particular, the ones that are observing and pilfering from other animals, they have got to be able to have the restraint to sit back and wait.
What were the animals last week where you were talking about they were in some situations they were hanging out with their predators, and other situations?
Oh yes, they were I believe were they mangabees? It was a kind of monkey with the chimps. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mangabees.
Yeah, the little monkeys hanging out with the chimps. And in some situations, they steered clear. And in other situations, they were like, "I'm going to go out and play this game and look for and get their scattered food." And that again is situational impulse control.
Yes, right? You're so right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So speaking of control. My other story is actually about mind control, parental mind control from a father to a mother. And it is all through the genes. This is a Cardiff University School of Biosciences story looking at paternal genes and how they can control the behavior of a mother and how well she takes care of her baby. So
that can't happen.
Hormonal signals. It can, in fact, hormonal signals given off from the placenta during pregnancy can affect things that are going on during the actual pregnancy. It can affect how they transport nutrients during the pregnancy, but hormonal signals also go into the mother's bloodstream and establish and maintain certain things during that pregnancy for afterwards. These signals might actually program a mother's behavior, which prepares them for their new role as a parent. So, digging a little deeper, this is all done in mice. These researchers looked at hormones from the placental cells called spongiotropoblasts, whose proliferation and therefore whose hormone output is held in check by a gene called FLDA2, PHLDA2. But what happens is the PHLDA2 is the one who holds back the hormones released by the placenta to make a mother act like a mother. In most genes, you have your two copies, one from the dad and one from the mom. But unlike most cases, this is one where only one copy of PHLDA2 is active in the mother. So looking at it, it is always the father's copy that is silenced. The father's copy is silenced. So they actually wanted to manipulate this and see what happened when they changed them to both being on, both being off, one on, one off, and see what happened to the mothers as a result and their maternal care. They found that mothers exposed to pups with the highest PHLDA2 activity and therefore reduced placental hormones nursed and groomed their pups less and instead focused on nest building. They're just tidying up the house, leaving their babies alone. But quote unquote paternalized mothers exposed to the lowest PHLDA2 dose and therefore the highest hormone levels spent the most time nurturing pups and less on housekeeping tasks. They also showed corresponding changes in the two regions of the mother's brain, the hypothalamus and the hippocampus. So it sounds like the father, by causing his PHLDA2 gene to be silent, is basically affecting the nurturing behavior of the mother.
Yeah.
Right. Which, if you think about it, there's this conflict, right, where the father wants the mother to put in maximum investment on the babies because his genes are in there. Mm-hmm. But the mother wants to take care of herself, not work herself to death, keep her space clean so she does not get sick, all of that stuff, right? And so there's this conflict. Yeah. So this is creating a balance so both are taken care of. But this does potentially have relevance in humans, as you might expect, because the PHLDA2 gene activity does vary between human pregnancies and correlates with placental hormones as in mice. Not exactly the same, but there is that correlation. So changes in mother's priorities during gestation and after birth might actually have something to do with this PHLDA2 gene, what's coming from the father, and all of this. So that's definitely the next step, is to start looking at this in humans.
So if I got this, if you increase the father's gene input, it decreases the amount of housework that is done. Is this correct?
Because
wait.
Yeah.
No, it's the other way. So
it's the other way.
So the male's contribution is silencing the gene. If you turn on his gene, the female ignores babies and takes care of the house. His contribution is turning off the gene and therefore making her take more care of the babies, less care of the
less housework.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I find interesting here is that cellular chromosomal imprinting is something that happens during the reproductive process, and it's the process of the silencing of genes. We really can't exist very often, like in a large number of our genes, with both of the you can't exist with both copies of the mother and the father's genes acting in tandem. And so one copy usually gets silenced and it's one individual's input is the one. So how is that controlled?
Right.
Is there a control that leads
Right.
the father's gene to be silenced more often?
That is the question indeed, especially since previous studies on humans have shown that similar placental genes have been linked to prenatal depression. And they are now looking at whether similar gene changes could be associated with poor quality maternal care in humans. So this is all potentially leading to what could hopefully be better pre- and postnatal care for mothers and children.
Yeah.
There you go.
Shut up, Gene.
But only a little, not all the way.
Not completely, just a little. We need a good balance. I love this. I love this idea of even in our, of the reproductive process, that it is conflict between the two sides, mothers, the fathers, in creating a successful offspring.
Yeah, it does. It's akin to an arms race, like an evolutionary arms race, right? Where you could see how the evolutionary pressure over time is from the male perspective, work yourself to death, saving my genes. Work yourself to death, saving my genes. And from the female perspective is like, nah, I can have more babies next year if I've survived to next year. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so there's this push-pull, just like with a predator-prey relationship, where you have selective pressure for both sides and you find this kind of midway. It's very interesting.
Survival, the now versus the later.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So much insight here. Oh my goodness. It's time for us to take a break.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to take a very short break. This is This Week in Science. We have some fun stuff. I've got shrooms ahead. I do.
I have drugs also in the second half.
You have drugs? Okay, so the second half of This Week in Science is full of drugs and spider eyes. You know you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned for more coming up in just a few moments.
Can't explain things you've heard more than intuition. A lot of research shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode of This Week in Science. We love being able to bring this show to you week after week after week, and we love that you help us do that. You give us a reason to keep coming back, and you actually help us come back week after week after week. How do you do that, you might ask? Well, one way is by subscribing. And you can find easy ways to subscribe by heading over to our website, TWIS.org. TWIS.org is where you find all things TWISy. And if you go to our main page, there's a big orange subscribe button that will help you subscribe to our show on Google in the podcast portal, Google Play podcast portal, iTunes, and in YouTube. So if you have not done so yet, please subscribe, because it is one reason and one way that we can keep counting on you and keep coming back week after week. Other ways are in that nice financial way, because, unfortunately, this world doesn't turn without a little capitalistic spin. So please help us out by buying some of our merchandise. If you have not done so before, we have a great store over on Zazzle, zazzle.com/thisweekinscience, or you can just click on the Zazzle store link that's at twis.org. All sorts of items. We've got mouse pads, t-shirts, luggage tags. We've got baby onesies, tote bags, wrapping paper, lumbar pillows, and these either have wonderful TWIS logos on them, or original artwork from Blair's Animal Corner calendars of years past. And we do hope that you peruse our catalog, because your purchases of items in here do go towards supporting the show. Now, back at twist.org, another way that you can help us out is by clicking on a donate button. There's a yellow donate button that will take you through a PayPal donation form. One time, you can make it like you choose it, and whatever amount, just click donate and it'll help us out. If you would like to donate in a recurring fashion, click on our Patreon link that's in the main header bar. That Patreon link will take you to our Patreon community, patreon.com/thisweekinscience. By joining us on Patreon, you will be able to choose your level of support and become a part of our little community there, in which there is a special RSS feed that is just for Patreon supporters, although it's pretty much the same RSS feed that goes out to everyone else. But there is a Patreon-only RSS feed there. Additionally, I do send out posts and little updates only for patrons over at Patreon. So you kind of get little insights into the inner workings of This Week in Science, at least over here when I'm working on things. There are various levels of support. Click on that red button, become a patron now. You know, it would be a huge gift for my birthday if you were to do something like that. It's my birthday. Help us keep TWIS working the way it has through many years, and become a patron, or donate through PayPal, or buy one of our wonderful items in the Zazzle store, and subscribe. And you know what, everybody? Thank you for joining us again for another episode of This Week in Science. We couldn't keep doing this without you. Thank you so much for your support. Nope, I gotta click on the right buttons.
Can't explain things you've heard more than intuition. A lot of research shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need.
And we are back with more This Week in Science.
Yes, we are. We are back yet again with more science. Yes, lots of science for all of you. But first, let's jump into This Week in What Has Science Done For Me Lately? And our letter this week comes in from Vanja Anderson. Vanja says, science has helped my cat stay, if not happy. He's a cat. He lives in, self-pity, healthy. He's had his fleas taken care of and been put on a special diet to reduce the pH in his urine. I'm looking to adopt a young kitten that will need to be dewormed, and science will help future cats live much longer lives so they can tell us their thoughts and complaints for years to come. Thank you, Vanja, for writing in. I do love stories. What has science done for your cats? What have they done for you? Cats are wonderful companions. I know that other people have opinions in this show, but we're not going to discuss them right now. But science.
I do not, let's just clarify this. I do not have a problem with cats. I've had cats as pets throughout my life. I've had cats in the past.
That explains a lot.
The only thing I have brought to people's attention is the fact that an indoor cat is a vector for Toxoplasma gondii. And I want people to be aware.
It's also a bird and a lizard killer. Oops.
It is. All right. So let's keep the cats indoors, people.
Keep them indoors.
Yeah.
There we
Indoor
go.
cats. All for it.
All right. Okay. But animals are lovely animals. They are also helped by science.
Yes.
Yes. So, Vanja, even though you have your self-pitying cat, thank you for writing in about it. I appreciate your letter. Everyone out there, I hope that you write in and let us know what science has done for you lately. I know it's done something good. Let us know about it. You can send me a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thisweekinscience. Makes it pretty easy. Or you can send me an email, Kirsten, Kirsten, at thisweekinscience.com. Let's keep filling up the show, this segment, with your letters, please. Justin, what you got?
Oh, what did I bring? Let's see. So back in 2014, which was about 4 years ago, Joe Nichols and Joaquin Cortiella from the University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston were the first research team to successfully bioengineer human lungs in a lab. Now, together with a team in the University of same university, Texas Medical Branch, have bioengineered lungs and transplanted them into adult pigs. These are pig lungs-ish. And they've had no medical complication after the transplantation. So to produce, to produce a bioengineered lung, they first need a support structure that meets the specs required for a functioning lung. To do this, they used a lung.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so they had an unrelated pig donate a lung. Kind of important that it's unrelated, right? And this unrelated pig donated lung was then treated using a mixture of sugar and detergent, although it's probably a lot more complicated than what you have in your kitchen, to eliminate all cells and blood in the lung, leaving only the scaffolding proteins, a skeleton of the lung behind. So now they have this lung-shaped scaffold made totally out of lung proteins. And then they needed cells to populate this scaffolding. So they took a lung from the pigs in the study. They took one of their lungs. This then became the source of the cells used to produce the tissue-matched bioengineered lung for the animals that these bioengineered lungs would then go back into. So the lung scaffold was placed into a tank filled with carefully blended cocktail of nutrients, and the animal's own cells were added to the scaffolding, and the procedures that they used, not detailed here. The bioengineered lungs were grown in a bioreactor for 30 days prior to transplantation. So that's pretty quick turnaround, 30 days. Animal recipients were then allowed to survive for 10 hours, 2 weeks, 1 month, and 2 months after transplantation, allowing the research team to examine development of lung tissue following transplantation, how the bioengineered lung integrated into the body, and complete success. Quotey voice here. The number of people who have developed severe lung injuries has increased worldwide, while the number of available transplantable organs have decreased, says Cortiella, professor of pediatric anesthesia. Our ultimate goal is to eventually provide new options for many people awaiting transplant. So this is a sort of preclinical trial, proof of concept. They did the thing. The only thing I take away from this, though, is that they had to get 2 lungs to make 1 lung.
Yeah.
Which means if they were replacing both lungs, they would have needed at least 3 lungs. Right? They would have needed 2 donor lungs to create the scaffolding, and 1 of the lungs from the recipient in order to populate those other
with
lungs
the cells.
So there's still a math problem. Okay. Still a math problem. You still need the donor, or an organ donor situation to do the providing. So
well, but we're getting better at, we're getting closer, if still very far away. I feel like we're getting closer to being able to 3D print organ scaffolding, right? We're getting incrementally closer, which means if we can get better at this side of it, then you'll need substantially less lungs. So we're perfecting the system here.
We're getting incrementally closer to a lot of things in this world. But the but the
I
point
feel
is,
like the scaffolding thing is a real thing that's going to happen.
But the question is, do you need the scaffolding? Do you need it to come from a human? Pigs have the reason they use pigs as test animals is because they have very similar physiological and anatomical parameters. So we use pig hearts for pig transplants. Is it possible that we could also use the pig lung scaffolds that have been seeded with the human lung cells?
right? So,
And is that and would that be an in between until we can 3D print the scaffolds?
and I think a big part of it is the fact that it came from an unrelated animal, because that does indicate that you won't have the typical organ rejection problems. Which, yeah, I think you're right. I think it may not matter then. That protein scaffolding doesn't appear to have any create any of that immune system reaction because it's loaded with the tissues from the donor. So yeah, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe we're already there. Maybe this is it. Maybe we don't have to wait for the 3D architecture. Maybe we can use pig lungs.
Yeah, or at least it's a good stopgap potentially if it works in humans. And then the next question is, can we use this methodology? I mean, the big issue here, they're talking about lung damage and it as being a leading driver of the need for these lung transplants, and the fact there is an organ shortage. Well, if your lung has something like cystic fibrosis, which is the result of a genetic issue, if you don't want your new lung to be seeded with your cells, even though it's tissue matched, because they just this week published a new paper about a new cell type in the lung that was found that they think is one of the main causes of cystic fibrosis, which might be responsible for it. So the question is then, can we find that cell type
and then do
genetic
selection?
Or genetic engineering, change, fix the mutations. Or, I mean, what can you do? How can we move forward?
Right. Yeah. You might be able, you can. I mean, it's not might. We're beyond might. You can do that. Right. Yeah. You can absolutely do that.
We are doing it. Oh, it's so exciting. It is so exciting. This is pretty exciting news. The fact that they had up to 2 months survival of an animal.
That's not
great.
like then that's how long out they even assumed they would be able to look out. But chances are they could have gone much longer, or but they were what they were studying was the integration, adaptation, sort of the healing process in there as well. But the way, and that's that after 2 months, I suppose you're just looking at the at a lung, and it's not really as interesting.
I love looking at just a lung. That's exciting. Yes, that's great. Let's see. Moving on forward. What else do we have other than that we're saving the world with bioengineered lungs? That's happening. Well, want to talk about some bones?
Yeah.
Bones. Where did vertebrates come from? This is a big question. Where did the bones of vertebrates come from? And researchers have had several hypotheses about where the bones of vertebrates, us and our ancestors, where they came from. And so we know that there early on, 400 million years ago, the evidence for our skeletons, early evidence for the evolution of vertebral columns and skeletons were found in fossil fishes called heterostracans. Heterostracans. I love saying some names of things sometimes. It's kind of fun. Anyway, they're very old, lived a long time ago. And they include some of the oldest vertebrates, this group of fishes, with a mineralized skeleton that has ever been discovered. But they're really old and it's fossilized tissue. And so the question is, what exactly is that fossilized tissue made of? Is it made of bone? And so there are skeletons in living vertebrates that come from 4 different kinds of tissue. We have bone, which we know of as the hard stuff inside our bodies. There's cartilage, which is like the stuff in your ears and your nose, the soft stuff, and dentine and enamel, which our teeth are constructed from. And these tissues, all of them are unique because they become mineralized as they develop. And that's what gives strength and rigidity to their structures. So researchers wanted to know exactly the question of primitive bone tissue. What really, where did it come from? They say in the abstract of their paper, the crux of the controversy in the question of the evolution of bone is the nature of the unmineralized spaces that are found all through the matrix in these early vertebrate skeleton fossils. And they say it's a bone-like tissue they call aspidin, is what they call this tissue. And so the spaces that are inside the mineralized bits, they have been hypothesized to have housed living cells, which is similar to our bone, where living cells give rise to the mineralized structure of the bone, or whether they had cell processes or particular fibers inside of them. And so they used synchrotron X-ray tomography to get at this true nature of aspidin, and they were able to determine that once and for all, these voids that were there in the structure of this early bone-like substance were not from living cells. And so this aspidin, that they call it, is acellular dermal bone. And they reject the hypothesis that it is a type of dentine, cellular bone, or even a transitional tissue, something like a cartilage. And so what they think, based on their study, is that the full range of skeletal tissue types were around before vertebrates arose. And so the tissue types were all there. They just weren't being used to create a skeleton in the way that the vertebrates are known to. Wow. And so it was a rapid evolution that occurred that led to the use of all those tissue types to create the vertebral column and skeleton.
Nice.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to look at the little things. And I like the scientific method here. I mean, they were cutting away hypotheses. It's like we're going to look at the evidence and we will get rid of the hypotheses that our evidence doesn't line up with. Our evidence goes this way. No cells. This was not a living cell there were no living cells that then created this structure around them and supported it. No, it was something different. So we'll get rid of that hypothesis. So that's the scientific method in action. Very visibly.
Nice.
Yeah. That's why I kind of liked this study the most. But anyway, yeah. Our bones, the mystery of the origin of our skeletons. It is being solved. The study was published in Nature Ecology and Evolution, if you're interested in following up on it.
It makes me want to go back through. It doesn't actually, but it makes me really excited for going back through college, or the people who are going to go through vertebrate biology, vertebrate evolutionary morphology, stuff like that. They're going to have so much more answers than any of us had. I mean, I even remember when I went through, they were like, yeah, and then there were turtles, and we weren't really sure. There was this weird, there's no middle ground. And then while I was taking that class, they found a fossil with a plastron, right? And so this is exactly like that. They've been saying, okay, and then there were bony fishes, and we're not exactly sure how. And now we're going to know, we're going to have a real answer to be able to provide in the history of the evolution of life.
Yeah.
So neat.
It is. I think it's very neat. All right, tell me about drugs, Justin. Drug us up.
Okay. Turns out that the use of prescription opioids in the United States, which has been an epidemic, it's been called a health crisis. There's been all sorts of conversation and political hand-wringing and campaigning and people talking about and people doing reach outs and lawsuits against pharmaceutical companies, some convictions of people who were found. So all of that's been going on. So we have finally beaten it. Oh, wait. No, actually, it says here that the use of prescription opioids in the United States has not substantially declined over the last decade, despite increased attention to abuse and awareness of the risks. This is a study published by the British Medical Journal. The results show that although opioid use and average dose of opioids kind of leveled off after a peak in 2012, 2013, all patient groups had a higher average dose in 2017 than they had in 2007. So I guess that means there's not more percentage of people. It's the same percentage of people. That's the leveling off. But now the dosage per pill has been going up.
That's not good.
Nope.
No.
And is particularly high amongst patients with disabilities. They find that the U.S. has the highest rate of opioid use in the world. When compared to per person consumption of opioids in the UK, the US was 7 times higher.
Well, they have socialized medicine, so
Wait, so do we for the most part.
no,
No, we don't.
no, we
Well,
don't.
why is it 7 times higher?
Because, well, I mean, this is
socialized medicine?
completely extrapolation, but the reason I said that
Figure it
is
out.
because a lot of the opioid crisis has often begins with self-medication.
So this
And
is all prescription based. So let me get a little deeper in. So this is also pointing out the dark sides of the opioid epidemic. An average of 40 people die in the U.S. every day from prescription opioid overdoses, which is not counting deaths due to people sourcing opioids without a prescription. And it has, of course, been declared a public health emergency. I've been hearing that gas stations across the Midwest, back east, that gas station bathrooms have been installing blue lights because it makes it impossible for people to find their veins. This is a thing. This is the thing now. This is how bad it is because so many bodies were being found in gas station bathrooms that gas stations are installing blue lights so that people cannot find veins to shoot up with. So that's,
oh my God.
That's the off prescription. But this is a study
This is
of
all prescription. This is
a study that was
insurance
actually
covered.
based on insurance, right? They found that disabled Medicare beneficiaries were much more likely to use opioids than others. They were amongst also the group to take the highest daily doses over the longest period of time. They found that 52% of disabled Medicare beneficiaries use opioids annually. That's 52%. Commercially insured, it's 14%. So and then what is 20%, 26% of aged Medicare Advantage beneficiaries, but 52%. And one of the things that I found that's just abhorrent about this, if you're disabled, it's probably because you have a chronic condition, right? It's to the point of being disabled. Opioids are never intended for chronic anything.
And that's more to my point, right? Is that sometimes a prescription is cheaper and easier, especially for insurance or for people who can't afford certain things, than surgeries and physical therapy and long, arduous kind of treatments that are treating the cause and not the symptom.
And or their doctors are not educated well enough on alternatives. There are not many alternatives. And the biggest rule for doctors is to reduce pain. And so if you have somebody coming in time after time into your checkups and your appointments saying, I'm in pain. Well, you continue the prescription.
Yeah, well, you're talking about right. This has been the conventional thought. But if we're losing 40 people a day to the doctor prescribed, that then they need to change their thinking. And it actually, this is the outcome. The authors suggest the doctors and patients should consider whether long-term opioids is improving patients' ability to function, and if not, consider treatments either as an addition or replacement to opioid use. One of the things that's been being brought up a lot is using something like a cannabis as a pain relief for a long term, for a chronic, something that does not.
Chronic for chronic, eh?
Well, right. Well, but one of the things with the opioids, though, is that they lose effectiveness in pain and actually just become an addictive sedative over time. And actually, the pain remains if in the long term. They are very effective for a short term. You got the surgery. Here's the pills. You kind of take them like you might take a short term antibiotic. Here, take this for the next 10, 12 days as the inflammation is at its worst, but then that's it. This is so any thoughts that anybody has that this is a thing that now that it's eureka, we understand this is a problem. Now
really
everyone is dealing with it. Yes, they're installing
really
blue
is a
lights in
problem.
bathrooms so the bodies don't show up there. That's what's taking place. That's the rest of it. The rate at which this consumption is these obviously the prescriptions being issued has not changed.
These numbers are not okay. These numbers
need to change.
I'm glad somebody looked at the numbers to determine what they are, but they're not okay.
They're not good.
You know what else is not okay?
What?
Losing your rear end while you're high on shrooms and amphetamines.
What are you talking about?
I know.
In terms of your segues, this is the one that's got. You know how like sometimes I start a segue and you get that really nervous look. Maybe you can't see it. I can see it. You get a really nervous look, and it's like oh, right now she doesn't trust me. That's interesting because I know where I'm going, but she suddenly does not. I'm for the first time I think in the years of doing this show. I'm like, I don't know where you're going, Kiki, and it's got me nervous.
So, a long time back, researchers discovered a fungus that was infecting cicadas. And this fungus has been it's been known for many, many years that this fungus infects cicadas while they sleep for their sleep cycles, which can be up to 17 years. And then
I still don't believe that. It just blows my mind that part of the story even exists.
Yeah, and then during the time that they're asleep, the fungus gets inside of them and it eats their insides and leaves a bunch of spores where it's the rear end of the cicada used to be. And then the cicada bursts from the ground when it's supposed to be awake. And this particular cicada acts kind of funny. It doesn't really want to eat very much. It wants to mate like crazy, and it's got tons of weird energy. And it doesn't seem to mind that its butt is not really there, and instead it's dropping fungal spores everywhere it goes. Well, researchers a few years back, they grabbed a bunch of cicadas with these white fungal spore covered butts, and they took a look at them up close. And they found that these fungal plugs are loaded with psilocybin and amphetamines.
And can this affect humans? Because I think I've met a few people over the years that might have had this happen to them.
And so the fascinating thing here, number one, across nature, no other fungus other than magic mushrooms, shrooms, are known to produce psilocybin until now. This fungus that is now called Massospora is the first time in the animal kingdom that psilocybin has been found outside of these special mushrooms. Additionally, the question of the amphetamine is strange. Researchers discovered this cathinone molecule. That's an amphetamine. And again, this is only known to be produced by a plant in the Middle East and Africa called khat. Khat is how it's spelled, and it's used as a stimulant. People chew it and use it as a stimulant in those areas. But it's not this compound. It's really only known to come from the khat plant. So we've got a fungus that produces two compounds that before now have only really been known to be produced by other organisms. One, another fungus, which is distantly related to the Massospora, and another one in the plant kingdom, even more distantly related.
Yeah, how's that getting in there?
And it turns out, looking at it, so these compounds only show up in the cicadas that are infected with the fungus, and the fungus has the genes to produce them. So it is the fungus that's actually doing this. And we don't know where it got the genes. We don't know how it's doing it. But the question is, why? It's probably for the behavioral control aspects. The fungus wants its spores to get out there. It doesn't want the cicada to notice that it's been compromised, right? It also wants the cicada to interact with as many others of its kind as possible, which would increase the mating aspects, that hyperactivity and mating of these individuals, and reduce feeding and foraging behaviors, which would potentially take it away from others.
So they're making them confused and hyper.
Exactly. And very social.
Yeah.
I don't know about confused. I think they're making them focused.
No, confused because they don't know what's going on with their own body.
I think they're making them very focused on mating and socializing.
And not focused on their butts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You don't know your backside from a mushroom.
So there's a great article on all of this, once again written by Ed Yong over in The Atlantic, if you want to read his writing on it. But this is an amazing system. And what an interesting new discovery of a fungus that's been known for a while and an effect that's been known for a while, but now we know why. And it makes it even weirder than before.
Yes. And you should figure out a way to follow Ed. Ed always has the best stories.
Right? He's great. I don't know. Yes, he does. So anyway, yes. This is one of the more interesting segues I've ever made, but I think it was worth it.
Hey, but that's crazy. This is going to become a Midwestern epidemic now. You're going to have people snorting cicada butts.
Oh, boy.
Oh, and that's something that Ed brings up in his story because psilocybin and the amphetamine, that's a Schedule 1 drug that needs to be controlled by the Drug Enforcement Agency.
Gotta arrest those cicadas, man.
And so they actually
handcuffs. Let's see the tiny ones.
So they
Lots of
actually
them,
they actually had to talk to the Drug Enforcement Agency and have a conversation about whether or not they could do these experiments to find out more about what was happening with the fungus and the cicada. And the DEA eventually said, oh, yeah, I guess you're not really going to be concentrating what you find in the cicadas for personal use.
Have you
So go
seen
right
how many
ahead.
cicadas come out every 17 years? That's a lot of them.
Yeah.
But only a small proportion.
Be had at the next.
Well, cicadas are one of the animals that they're suggesting is the food of the future too. So what if you grab the wrong cicada and bake it and put it in your taco? Then you're in for a very different evening than anticipated.
Wow, the cicada flour is really good. I mean, I can't imagine how good.
Yeah.
I've never had any of those.
Yeah.
You may have to eat a lot of cicadas that are specifically infected by this fungus for that to be a consideration. But yeah, I don't know. Microdosing through cicadas.
So weird.
Oh my God. Just wow. Steve, you're really focused today. I really appreciate it. Was that cicada this morning, bro. Threw it in my coffee.
By the way, your hair looks really great.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Some actually great news coming out of our Washington, D.C. government, the commander in chief. he has finally picked a science advisor.
Okay.
This is good news, you guys.
Is it actually a scientist?
Yes, he has chosen a scientist with a great track record who is he's a meteorologist, but he is very, very vocal
Wait,
about
a
his support.
meteorologist?
No, but listen, he's vocal. Justin,
already.
be quiet. He's a scientist who studies the weather, but he has been very vocal about his appreciation for and understanding of climate science specifically and our need to be active on climate change issues. And so they are Trump has picked an advisor who might actually do some good advising with relation to climate issues.
Yeah, because
Did anybody tell him?
One thing we've learned in the past, the current commander-in-chief takes advice.
Yeah, he's very good at listening to advisors.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
getting much hope on that one.
Yeah, the appointee is named Kevin Drogemeyer, and he has been tapped to direct the Office of Science and Technology Policy. I don't know whether or not he's yet said yes, but people across the scientific community seem to be fairly excited about this choice in particular, even though it is very late into Trump's term as president.
Yeah,
So,
first half
we'll
of
see.
my tenure as president didn't need a science advisor.
We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see if he even is able to if Drogemeyer does take over the position. It's being late to the game may be an issue, but he, according to people, has a lot of policy experience and working with people at in political levels of government.
Will do him no good. Will be completely useless training and experience for him now. But
we
good.
will see.
Yeah.
But it's exciting that someone has been tapped, and it's a well qualified scientist to advise.
I don't know if it was Mad TV or In Living Color, but there was a dating site for people who had sort of given up on the fact that they would ever find. It was called. They had the dating site was Lowered Expectations. Yeah.
So you're favoring some lowered expectations?
I'm just saying that the weatherman advising science is a lowered expectation when in the past we had a physicist ahead of the DOE.
Admittedly, the bar is low. We're happy there's a scientist as a science advisor. But
I'm gonna make you laugh.
you know what though? I don't know if I need to be scared. Blair wanted to talk about spider eyes.
It's actually really fun. So think about some of the stories we've talked about in the past. Here's a big hint. And do you think spiders can see colors?
I think spiders can see colors.
I think spiders see colors that I can't see.
Yeah. So the expectation would be, especially looking at peacock spiders, for example, who I was just mimicking there. Yeah, they have amazing, brilliant displays, which would mean that those spiders for surely could see color. But a recent study from University of Cincinnati wanted to see if this ability to see color translated to more humdrum-looking spiders like wolf spiders. Don't listen to them, wolf spiders, that are muted browns and tans instead of the bright colors of a peacock spider. So the assumption was that wolf spiders don't care too much about color, that they're really just trying to camouflage from predators, and that in sexual selection, it's not really important. So they wanted to look closely at the neurobiology of wolf spider eyes, and they wanted to see what their retinas were doing. So like most spiders, wolf spiders have 4 pairs of eyes. Some of them have reflective lenses called tapedoms that sparkles in bright light, which is when you go out at night, or when I was in Florida a couple weeks ago and we went out on a nighttime swamp tour and you shine a flashlight out, you'll see a bunch of spider eye shine, which is kind of terrifying. That is from that reflective lens. And so looking at all of that and looking at the neurobiology involved, they wanted to look at behavior and the physical aspects of these spider eyes. Of course, I should say most humans have trichromatic vision. They have cones that can see red, green, and blue. Wolf spiders, it turns out, have dichromatic vision. They have green and ultraviolet cones. So they're basically colorblind, but they are sensitive to light, particularly in the green wavelength and, of course, in ultraviolet. So in the study, they wanted to see how spiders reacted to videos of courting spiders. And they wanted to see a change in background color related to the spiders, contrast and intensity. Females were more likely to respond to videos of males that had sharp contrast from background, and they responded better to color and monochrome than grayscale. So they definitely can see color, and color makes a difference. They also showed it to male eavesdroppers who lurk in the background, learning how to mimic other males' courting displays, bite on their moves. And they found that the males had different things that they were paying attention to. So they were looking more at sharp contrast from background, but the females were looking at contrast, but also color. In all of that. So the long and short of that is that the wolf spiders actually have a really important piece to play when it comes to color. And this makes sense once you realize that the wolf spiders come out and they breed in seasons as they change. So everything's green by the end of the season. When they first come out, things are still kind of muted, so they can show up a little bit easier. But once everything's green, that green color that they can see isn't good enough because everything's green. So they have to be able to see contrast and other more subtle changes in their environment. And so this was done with a lab of about 1,200 wolf spiders. The researchers say virtually all of them are accounted for.
And aren't wolf spiders, many of them are they're predators, right? Some of them are
fast. They're very fast, they're jumpy, and they're usually ground dwellers.
Yeah, we were talking about them last week, and you were both terrified of them.
Yes.
But I think what's really interesting with this is that cats and dogs that are predators also have this kind of color blindness in their environment. And the color isn't what's so important to them. It's the contrast. And so it's being able to pick things out of their environment to be able to attack them, to chase them.
Yes. Which, as Justin points out, they're one of my less favorite types of spiders. That I am terrified by them. But now that I know that they're in some ways color vision inhibited, they might actually be a kindred spirit to myself. And I might need to cut them a little bit of slack. We'll see.
Your wolfy friends.
Yeah.
That are getting larger.
Visit them in the insect zoo tomorrow and go, I feel your pain.
Yeah, and aren't these your wolfy friends who are getting larger in the Arctic with climate change?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
they are.
We need to get them teeny tiny and chroma glasses.
That would be pretty
They'll
fun.
start crying. They see all the beautiful colors.
See the colors.
It's so beautiful.
And they start dancing like a peacock spider. Yeah. Then you know everything's gone topsy-turvy out there. Oh my goodness. Fada was asking me in the chat room not to forget the black hole sun story. Yes, the black hole sun story. I'll throw this in here right now to let you know what was going on there. So researchers, I talked last week very briefly about the wonderful image of the center of our universe around the black hole at the center of our universe, and the stars that are cycling quickly around that, and how it was this amazing image of the energy. Maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, the energy that was to be found in certain places around the center of the universe. Well, this last week, researchers published in Astronomy and astronomy and astrophysics, a study staring at the black hole at the center of our galaxy, Sagittarius A. And they were trying to show that Einstein's general theory of relativity actually works at very large scales, not just close to our planet, where we've been able to show that it works previously. And so they looked at a star, one star, very close to the black hole at the center of the Milky Way. This star, the last time they looked at it was about 16 years ago. So it completes its elliptical orbit once every 16 years. They watched S2, which is the name of the star, whip around, and they've been tracking it for a long time, and it came back around again, and they're like, zoom, and they looked at it. Well, it's a star, right? So it emits light. And one way they can find out whether the immense mass and gravitational field produced by the black hole actually warps space-time is to look at the light from that star that's very close to the black hole. And they found redshift. The light of the star was shifted with respect to its position and where it was moving around the black hole. And so it, once again, shows support to Einstein's general theory of relativity. It's a great theory, and it continues to be upheld over and over again. This team is known as the Gravity Collaboration, and they used the Very Large Telescope Array in the Atacama Desert of Chile, which basically they took multiple telescopes, put all of their collection of the light together to create one signal from here on Earth. This is us here on Earth looking at the center of our galaxy for one little star.
Also a reminder that I love about the cosmologists, the naming of their things.
Yes. Yes.
So
the gravity collaboration.
Gravity collaboration, Very Large Telescope. All right. Like, just call it what it is. Like, you were describing the brainy parts, and I was like, I don't know Latin. I have no idea what you're referring to. If there's a context or something else I should be gleaming from the Latin used to name the different parts of the brain. But if they just called it like the reasoning part of the brain, or the cognitive-y part of the brain, or the memory-ish thing in the brain, like, then it would be like much more accessible for the layman to understand what the heck people are talking about. I love that that people who study space will have things like a very big telescope that they call the Very Big Telescope. Which is brilliant.
And I think they're working on there's some new telescope that's going to be the really large.
Yeah, no, this is the
They're doing it again right now. The super large telescope.
The brand new super large telescope. What would you call it? How about a brand new super large telescope? Oh, I love the idea. That's so fantastic.
It is wonderful. All right, everybody.
I've got one last study. I got one last.
I'm
sneaking one in. I snuck one in right at the very last second, just because it kind of made me giggle. This is also the British Medical Journal. They did this study. You can go to the site. You can find our link. You can read the study, but it's long-term heavy drinking and long-term abstinence from drinking both increase dementia risk.
Say it again.
So if you drink too much or you don't drink at all, you have an increased risk of dementia.
So you could also say, what is it called? Drinking in moderation.
Right.
Reduces dementia.
Yes, which here would equivocate to the average of 2 drinks a day. Would be
what? That's a lot.
Really? That's a lot.
Well, no, as an average, right?
No, as an average, no, that's not a lot. Unless a week is 3 days long.
I don't know. I'm just thinking about a person. I'm a person who doesn't drink every single day. Right. And so then if you average out to 2 a day, that means the 2 days a week that I'm actually drinking.
Yeah, it's not enough.
I'm having like 7 drinks.
Yeah, you need to, if you want to be the 200-year-old brained Blair, you need to up your game.
Wait, except that drinking also makes you fat. So that's not good for your body
that's
because
that's also not true. That is, where did you hear that?
alcohol has a lot of calories.
Yeah, but that's not, no, it's not those kind of calories though. Anyway,
Anyway,
not
this
fat
sounds
calories,
like a
no
conversation
fat cells in
for the after show.
Yes,
This-
pure energy. It's not the thing that burns fat.
This does sound like a conversation for the after show. You guys, we gotta go.
We gotta go.
We do have to go. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. This brings us to the end of another episode of This Week in Science. And I would like to say thank you to those of you in the chat room who have been hanging out and chatting while we have been here chatting. Thanks so much for joining us in our chat room over at twist.org and also over at YouTube. Thanks for all your talk and you're keeping each other company. And I love it. It's the community. It's fantastic. Fada, thank you for supporting the YouTube chat room. It's wonderful that we have you to do that. Also for helping with the YouTube descriptions and our social media on a weekly basis. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. I wouldn't have audio. It would be a lot harder for me to put together the podcast without you. And everyone else out there, once again, thank you for listening. And to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Tyrone Fong, Mark, EO, Byron Lee, Kevin Parachan, Mark Hessenflow, Matt Sutter, Aaron Luthen flying out, Christopher Rapin, Brendan Minish, Greg Briggs, Robert Gary S., Marjorie, Rudy Garcia, Robert Aston, Kurt Larson, Steve Lesseman, Ben Rothick, Sean Lamb, Greg Riley, Jim Drapost, Lisa Slazewski, Christopher Dreyer, Brian Carrington, Jason Olds, John McKee, Paul, Rick Ramus, Artyom, Richard Porter, Sarah Chavez, Ulysses Adkins, Jacqueline Boyster, Ashish Pants, Jim Seabright, Noah Zemke, Christoph Zuknurek, Dave Neighbor, Kevin Reardon, Aiden Jeff, Brian Condren, Richard Eric Knapp, Kyle Washington, Time Jumper 319, Bob Calder, Bob K., Bob Calder, Bill K., Jason Roberts, Matthew Litwin, Jack, Mark Mazzaros, John Ratnaswamy, Craig Landon, Aaron, Ed Dyer, Tony Steele, Alex Wilson, Steve DeBell, Andy Groh, Joshua Fury, Charlene Henry, Harrison Prather, Ken Hayes, Richard Onimus, G. Burton Lattimore, and Paul Disney. Thank you for all of your support on Patreon. For those of you who are interested in supporting us, you can find information at twist.org. You can also help us out simply by telling your friends about TWIS. And on next week's show, I am so excited about our interview. We are going to talk about birds and they're dead.
Yes. Are we talking about crow funerals?
We're talking about crow funerals
Yes.
on next week's show with a graduate student who is completing her dissertation right as we speak. She's typing it up. Hopefully she'll be done by next week and able to do the interview.
Heads down.
That's right. And we will be live online, 8 p.m. Pacific time on twist.org/live. You can watch and join the chat room. We're also live on our YouTube channel. You can find that at twist.org/YouTube or directly at YouTube. Look for This Week in Science and go for our live broadcast. But if you can't make it, it's all right because past episodes are always, they're saved on the internets for you. And you can find those past episodes at YouTube or at twist.org where you can subscribe to the show.
Thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science in your iTunes directory, or if you have a mobile type device, you can Google TWIS, the number 4 droid app in the Android marketplace, or simply This Week in Science and anything Apple Marketplacey.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts or other listeners.
Or you can contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, or Justin at twisminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in your subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We will be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
It's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 I've got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.
And now we begin the after show, which is not gonna last really long because my son is still awake.
And it's your birthday. You still have 2 more hours of birthday.
I have 2 more hours of birthday. My child is still awake. And he's been down here hiding under a blanket. I made him a little makeshift fort bed. He's not sleeping. He's been probably watching YouTube videos on the iPad.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not sleeping. I just went and checked on him and he looked a little frantic and sweaty.
Uh-oh.
He looks like he needs to go to sleep. Somebody didn't get enough. Yeah, tomorrow's going to be fun.
What did you do for your birthday today? Anything good?
I had a lovely day. Yes, everything was good. I had breakfast with my son and my friend, and then we went and got pedicures.
That's fun.
Kai got a pedicure, his first one. That was
Oh
pretty
my goodness.
awesome.
Did you think it was tickly?
Totally.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, and Kai got all the presents. Kai got a fedora. We like walked past a hat shop, and Kai was like, he was full mood, and he's out. And he's like, these hats are great. I gotta look at these hats. Can we try on hats? I want to try on hats. And he picks out a white fedora. Now my son has a white fedora.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was awesome. I was like, okay, you need that hat. That's great. And then what do we do? Then we had some cupcakes, and Kai and I hung out and played Legos, and then we hung out together and read for a while. And then we had dinner, and then we hung out in the not hot tub.
What does that mean?
It's a hot tub. It's our hot tub that's been turned down because it's been hot here.
Oh.
So it's the not hot tub.
Not hot tub.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we had a very nice day.
Lovely.
Lovely. I spent the day mostly with my son, and it was just it was wonderful. And we
That's
both,
great.
for the most part, I stayed off our devices and hung out together. It was just awesome.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yep. It was really great.
Nice of you to stay off of your devices long enough to hang out with your child. That's very sweet.
Shut up.
It's the other way too, Justin.
My son.
No,
was
actually, no. I know
well.
this. I'm joking completely. Because I now have an 11-year-old with an iPhone.
Oh yikes!
Who just like I have to like be like, we're gonna have a timeout from you looking at the thing and watching something long enough for us to just cohabitate a space. It's really like I mean, I'm not doing this like when my day, because in my day we had nothing to do.
Yeah,
we were very bored.
There was boredom.
We got into a lot of trouble because we tried to invent things to do and they weren't always wise. So I like having overstimulated kids because the alternative is having bored children whose minds start idling and start doing terrible things with their time. So it's fine. It's great. I appreciate it. But yeah, sometimes you want to reel that in and just be like, let's talk or experience something at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. I think sometimes it's nice. I mean, once upon a time I read books in paper format. I still do that a lot, but I also read a lot of books on my phone in the Kindle app. And so it's like, wait, I'm not on the phone doing social media. I'm doing something that I've done my whole life, which is reading. But to my son, it looks like I'm just still on my device, ignoring him, And so he's like, you're on your device. Why can't I be on mine? I'm like, well, I'm reading. He's like, well, I'm like, you should read. I want to be on my device. And I'm like, yeah. So there's a balance to be made because it's nice to sit and read together. But should I say, okay, I'm reading a paper book while we're doing reading time together, just to make it?
Yeah, because the optics of it. You're absolutely right. If you had a paper book, it's a different optic, at least from your own perspective. It's still a device. But
it's a device.
From your own perspective of like, I'm doing a good thing versus I'm setting a horrible example.
Yeah. It's 100 years ago. Will you put that consarn book down and look at me when I'm talking to you?
Exactly.
No books at the dinner table.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that age-old stereotype of the parents at the breakfast table with the newspaper, the kids going, hey, dad, dad ignoring, just reading the newspaper.
While
right?
smoking.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. The hardware changes, but the behaviors are very similar. But it's an interesting question. But anyway, my son is now again in his hot house. He's under the blanket with the iPad. He said he wanted to come say hello, but I said you have to wait until the after show, and now it's the after show, but he's not listening to me because he's got his headphones on. Can you hear me? Kai. No, he had nothing. Nothing. He's in his own world. He can't even hear me. If I yelled fire, he wouldn't even.
Oh man. That's something I see actually a lot. Not to sound like a curmudgeon-y
Blair,
old person, but here we go.
You're the curmudgeoniest of us all.
It's true.
Right, I know.
Because I see people
2 drinks a day. What happened?
No. I see people walking just on city streets with both headphones in now is very normal.
And looking at a device.
And looking at a device. Both headphones in, looking at a device, walking around. And not only is that extremely unsafe, but you're missing so much. Like you're walking through San Francisco and you're looking at a phone with your headphones in, and you're missing like the weird debate on the street corner, and you're missing like, the flock of pigeons that just flew across your site, and you're missing the fog rolling across, Suture Tower, whatever it is, right? You're just you're walking in a space, and not only is it the safe thing to know what you're doing, but it's also like the human experience, right? Is when you're walking through a space to know what's going on around you.
Yeah. But that reminds me, I almost hit a pigeon with my car the other day. It was the weirdest timing of the thing. I was driving down the road as the pigeon was flying across the street at like car window level. And it was like flying and then it's, because it's flying and it's getting close to the windshield. I'm like, I had to slow down. Like I thought I was going to run into a pigeon while driving. I'd never experienced, but it was also kind of cool because it was flying across. And I was like, got a very neat sort of surreal view of a pigeon flying.
Yeah, I just swerved around a pigeon recently that didn't get out of the way.
It just was like, I don't
pigeon
care.
Don't care. This is like these are the
enough.
honey badgers of the pigeon world.
Yeah.
Pigeon don't care. This last week I finally got around to seeing Ready Player One. Have you guys seen it?
No, and somebody told me to see it, and they're like, you have to see it because there's something, and you know it when you see it. And I'm like, I haven't seen it yet.
There's something, and you'll know it when you see it. What?
I don't know if there's a character that is that reminds them of me, or if it's some sort of an inside joke that we have shared over the years that I'm like will only come to fruition when I've seen it. I don't know what it is.
That is very vague.
It is. But that's how it was presented. It's like, once you see it, you know what I'm talking about. But you have to see it because I'm not going to spoil it. All right.
Irons in the Fire over in YouTube says they read the book a couple of years ago and it ruined the movie for them. Oh. I read the book too, and I really, really liked the book. I thought it was great. It was great. It was great. But I think it was long enough ago that when I just recently saw the movie wasn't ruined. And I was watching it with my 7-year-old son, and we had so much fun. It was it's an adventure movie, and it has lots of great 80s references, although they changed it a lot from the book. So it's not the same as the book. And they did change a lot of stuff, which I can see would be really upsetting to people.
Are there 80s music references at all?
Oh yeah, there's 80s music references in it. Like it's
So then this might be have given me the clue, because this particular friend can name and sing the lyrics to any 80s song. If it's a song that happened in the 90s, guy has no idea what the words are. 70s song, I barely even vaguely heard. But if you can give him the song is I'll start you off with a lyric, or I'll start you off through the whole thing. He knows all of the words. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. I know. So anyway,
iTunes yet? Is like that, or
that's where we saw it was iTunes.
Okay.
I think it was either iTunes or Amazon. One of the two. We rented it or bought it or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
situation these days.
Yeah, video on demand. I thought it was great. Don't expect it to be true completely to the books, but I think it's a very good, to make it one book, one movie that's not too long with all the stuff in it. I thought they did a good job.
This is why I avoid
but
reading books now, is because I don't want to ruin the movie.
Yeah.
Right. But the big question is, the Ready Player One story is that so much of it takes place in virtual reality, which is this ultimate removal of self from the real world. And there's a scene in the movie where they have you watch people on the streets wearing their headsets and doing things like on the sidewalks. Like they don't even care that they're in the real world because they're in the virtual world. And so I think it's a very interesting question as we continue forward. What kind of limits are we going to, this question will keep coming up. Will keep coming up over and over again.
Well, this happened with Pokemon Go. Remember, people were like looking at their phones and walking off of cliffs and things. Because they were so immersed in this augmented reality, and that they didn't even have their eyes covered.
Yeah, that's just augmented reality.
Well,
yeah.
But here's one little element of perspective I would add to this. Right, you're watching somebody do something without a physical reality around them, so it looks really strange, right? But if you took somebody who was doing something in the physical world and you put them on a street corner, and you had them doing what Blair might be doing at work, sitting at a table and typing. But you just removed the fact that anybody else could see the typewriter. Listen to me.
Typewriter.
Keyboard.
Typewriter.
Computer. But if you just took them and removed them from the situation where they were like sweeping a floor, or I don't know what people do, a mechanic working on a car, but you got rid of the car so that nobody else could see it. Right? But they were still going through these motions. It would look bizarre what they were doing. Mm-hmm. But they're actually still doing something with reality. The fact that we can't see that reality is the only thing that's weird about it, which would be weird if we could not see other people's reality all the time. It's just, So I don't know that there needs to be a limitation or anything like this. I think what's more interesting is the potential for people who aren't somewhere to be doing an actual work removed from their physics.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're not getting our teleport anytime soon, so that's the next best thing, right?
Right.
Is I'm VR commuting today.
That's right. Well, we could have a VR meeting, we could go into our VR space and talk to our avatars.
Yeah.
It would be almost like we were there.
My Bitmoji. Can I be my Bitmoji?
Well, and then the question is that it's just a thing that requires human observation. Mm-hmm. So I sort of picture one of the things like when an example that just occurred to me is one of those production lines where you've got a conveyor belt of some kind of food going by, whatever it is, bananas, chocolates, I don't care, and you have a quality inspector. And they're looking for the thing with the brown dots or the white dots that shouldn't be with the rest of them, right? And that person normally is physically there with plastic gloves and a little like hair net and like grabbing stuff off of this conveyor belt. And it's just because the human eye can tell the difference and spot the difference better than a computer eye can, or an optical system.
For now.
And probably for quite some time. Some sort of distinctions, like, okay, it's the right color, but it's the wrong shape. This is the right shape, but it's got some color, some problems with the colors, whatever it is. And there's a human actually there pulling stuff off a quality control conveyor belt. This is just a make-it up thing. A virtual reality controlling a virtual reality present human, controlling a robotic arm could do the job just as well, because the key part of that job is the ability for the human's comprehension to be better than that of a computer. So there's things where you could actually play it. But that person,
all sorts of
that
things.
person who's at work making whatever dollars an hour could also be on the metro at the same time doing this. And everybody's like, that's really weird. But if they saw the conveyor belt and the person with the hat and going like this, they'd be like, that's totally normal. So I don't know.
And as Fungo Man in the chat room says, y'all are joking about VR commuting, but you're literally doing that without the helmets right now.
Yeah, aren't we?
It's true.
Yeah, good point.
Except,
I sometimes forget.
We are, but we're still aware. I'm aware of my son over here. I can see him under his blanket. I'm aware of my garage. I'm not in a studio with you.
No, but here's the thing. If my neighbors hear me talking at this volume of conversation and yet hear no other side of a conversation at any volume, I'm as weird as the person on the street doing the arm movements. There's a guy in the next place who's having this long conversation with himself every Wednesday night for about 2 hours. And it's just him. There's nobody else there. There's nobody else talking. We don't see anybody go in. We don't see anybody go out. And we don't hear another voice. Only that voice of that one person talking the whole time. So yeah, that is a virtual reality from their perspective.
Well, remember when the Bluetooth headsets first came out?
Oh yeah, you could no longer tell crazy people on the street from somebody who is like an.
You have to be like, does that man have a briefcase? Okay, he's probably having an important business call, but you can't be too sure.
And then that one time where you just assume the person next to you is on a Bluetooth call, and then you look over and realize, oh no, you're just having a very impassioned conversation with themselves.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Danger signals didn't even go off that I should just possibly be aware of how proximity, but then, oh yeah, no, there's no device anywhere. Oh gosh. Right.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways.
There you go.
Yeah, I think the point is if you're around people, I mean, it's the same thing as like if you're in, I think it's the social graces, right? If you're in public, getting off your phone when you're at a cash register and talk to the person who's ringing you up, or at least be, present for them. You don't have to talk to them necessarily, but be present in what you're doing. And
yeah,
I think it's the social aspects, making eye contact with people.
I don't know how often this seems to happen. It seems to happen a lot at gas stations where the person on the other side of the counter is on a Bluetooth having a conversation
without you. Yeah.
Without while they're like, so it doesn't go both ways. So I don't know. We have all sorts. We're gonna have a different world than the one we were born into.
It's happening right before our eyes.
It's happening. Yeah. It's already happening.
I'd be really interested. You know what I was thinking about the other day? One more thing, and then we can let Kiki go have a birthday before it's all over. I was thinking about cell phones, but more importantly, once SMS texts happened, and now that smartphones happened, I wonder if people, if jobs in general, if jobs in general, if people's productivity has gone down or up.
No, it's up.
You think it's up?
Yeah, there have been a few studies on this. When internet access is allowed at work, productivity tends to go up. And here's
as compared to before the internet?
Yes. And here's part of why. Here's the secret of why it is you should allow all of your employees to have internet access. Because a magnitude more time is saved than is lost to social media or checking emails or anything by being able to Google things that they don't know about their job, or or Google solutions to problems that they otherwise would have had several meetings, eating up a lot of company time. They Google and go, oh yeah, like, okay, in the current lab, I know there's a protocol for this, or I know there's a way for this, I know there's an equation for this, I know there's a solution for this. How do you do this again? And people will just Google it on their phone from selecting the appropriate source and go, oh yeah, this is how you do it, right? And it's like that is, and also the you can make it even simpler with the smartphone. having a simple device like a calculator always at the ready. Having a camera always at the ready.
Yeah, I also wonder about how much time was spent during the day if you couldn't readily check in with loved ones or things like that. Like, if you have a kid at home sick on the couch, or, a spouse or whatever, and you're like, oh, if they need something, they'll text me, right? As opposed to the idea of like, oh no, I have to like carve out time to make a call to figure out what's going on, or I have to go home at lunch or whatever it is. I do wonder if the accessibility of like the security blanket of knowing that everything's okay is helpful.
So that's that, but there's also, you got to think like the interconnectivity of your employees being able to email each other. If your company has a headquarters in a different city, a different state, being able to email a clarification instead of sending a letter or calling when the person happens to be available on the telephone. Like all of these things, like I think, all of the computers accelerate productivity. What then happens is, how do you feel? The real challenge has always been, and is often met, how do you feel?
Hi.
Hi.
How do you feel the hours of saved time from this increased productivity with more work? It's the only, right?
I think actually it probably balances out a little bit, because there probably is some messing about going on social media and BuzzFeed and Reddit and stuff that is probably detracting from work in a way that, it would be very obvious if someone was like reading a comic book or something at their desk, but it's much less obvious now. You can be kind of covert.
Comic books at your desk. Everybody does that.
It's not what you're being paid to do.
What are you doing?
What are you doing, Kai?
What time is it in Portland right now?
Late. 10:22.
Oh yeah, it's 10:22 p.m.
Oh
what are you doing up this late? I'm not even supposed to be up this late.
I woke up.
No, you haven't even gone to sleep yet.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, I'm sure you get this all the time. But you are amazingly, you look just like your father and just like your mother at the same time. How is that possible?
I don't know.
You don't know.
He tries very hard at it.
You don't have the answers for how you look like both of us at the same time.
I don't.
No answers. No answers.
What do you have to wake up early for something tomorrow, Kai? Do you have something important tomorrow?
That I know
An early meeting? No.
Yeah, you're talking with that team in London.
Yeah.
6 a.m.
Yeah, they have those key stakeholders. They need their first quarter reports.
I don't even know what they're talking about, Kai.
No, Mom. No, I don't. Please don't type him. He's gonna be sleeping in tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think.
What time do you usually go to bed, Kai?
8:30.
Oh.
This is a 2 hour later than your bedtime night. This is a staying up late.
And he got to stay up late watching videos on YouTube.
All right, what videos on YouTube were you watching?
Yeah.
Videos, weird ones.
What's a weird video? Because we want to know what the kids are doing. This is the whole point. Once you get older, you become obsessed with, what are the kids up to? What are they doing now? What weird videos are they watching?
Try not to laugh.
I won't.
Oh no, they were try not to laugh challenges. I know.
Oh, well, that's the video. I'm like, no. Feel free to share. I won't laugh at you. You meant it's a thing that you watch where people are compelled to laugh, but they're. I actually played that game tonight on this show.
I saw that. That was my fault.
That was all from Blair. Blair was saying all sorts of things that were trying to make me laugh.
Yeah,
and I
got you good.
And it took a while, but I did pretty good. I was like, I'm going to be professional. I'm going to take this from the
I can be
scientific perspective,
professional.
and I'm not going to leave. And then there was something you said. I was like, what?
I know what it
and
was.
he said it again. I was like, I can't help it.
Yeah.
Very well done, Blair.
You're welcome.
Very, very well done.
It's all very well done.
Yeah.
Good night.
Are you
Good
going to
night,
go to
Kai.
sleep? Okay.
Yeah.
Good night, Kai.
We need to put him to bed. So
Yeah.
Before midnight,
Is it
otherwise the
here?
goblins come.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Going out into your ear.
Uh-huh. And don't turn on your iPad again. Okay. I'm gonna we're gonna go to bed.
Good night.
So thanks.
Say goodnight, Justin.
Good night, Justin. Say good night, Blair.
Good night, Blair.
Good
night,
Kiki.
And happy
Happy birthday to you.
birthday.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching. And Blair and I and Justin started talking about it last week, I think. And then I started making all the show rundowns going up through December. And it looks as though our 700th show will be right around Blair and Justin's birthday. So we'll celebrate their birthday with 700 episodes. How does that sound?
I'm
Is
going to
that
dress
really
up.
Is that gonna really be? Wow.
If
that's
we
kinda
don't cancel any more episodes for the rest of the year and we just go through December 12th will be our 700th episode.
Did
That
are we
would be
doing one the day
amazing.
before Thanksgiving?
Well, that's what we have to tell. It's a Wednesday,
Oh,
so
okay.
we
Yeah,
could
yeah.
or
Yeah.
not,
I
depending
think
on.
we
We've
should.
done it both ways in the past.
We have done it both ways, and that will make the difference between
Okay.
700 on your
tell you what.
birthday or not on your birthday.
I tell you what,
Ish.
I'll be here. Then it's just up to you two if we'll
Okay.
be a 2 or 3 show.
right.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then Halloween is the 31st,
Bye.
which is
Oh,
also a
forget it.
Wednesday.
That blew it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Bye.
Mm.
I'm not gonna make it.
Anyway,
Halloween is sacred ground.
Yeah.
And
it is kind of sacred ground.
Not for me. The Saturday before or after is my sacred ground.
That's right. The Saturday, not the
Until
Wednesday.
something changes.
What? Oh! Is this a news flash?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Not a new. Nothing has changed.
No, heck no.
Heck,
What do you mean?
I'm not
heck
ready.
no?
I'm not ready for
Well,
that.
you know what? You're never ready. But as what your story tonight proved, your brain chemistry will make you ready.
That
whether
is
you
true.
were
That is true.
prepared or not. It'll just
that's
happen.
right. The chemistry happens. The science happens. This show happens, and it'll keep happening. And we'll make it to 700, and we'll have a party no matter what, because it seems like a reason to celebrate. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. And we hope you come back next week so that we can talk all about bird funerals.
Yes. I did not even know it was a thing. This is gonna
It's
be
a
fun.
Dang,
That's
I
gonna be
know.
amazing.
Let's learn all about it.
Totally.
Okay. Good night.